Welcome back to Gemstone Kingdom. If this is your first time here, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. It really gives me the motivation to bring you even more fascinating stories from the world of gemstones. The value of these gems was never just in their beauty. They were symbols. They were bargaining chips. They were the difference between a war continuing and a war ending. To place such a gem on the table was to say, here is proof that we will not fight again. Yet among them all, one stone towered above the rest. From a single valley in India came diamonds of such purity that they became the very currency of empires. Each time one of these stones changed hands, history shifted with it. A dynasty fell. A new power rose. Wars concluded not with ink and parchment, but with the gleam of crystal-clear carbon. And the price of the greatest of these diamonds? Not measured in gold, not even measured in the armies it defeated. Its price was empires themselves. Today, fragments of that legacy remain locked behind glass in crown jewels and museums. But to understand why those stones are still argued over, still claimed and contested centuries later, we must look back to the top 10 gemstones that ended wars. From soft pink quartz placed in tribal rituals to emeralds surrendered in the jungles of Colombia, from Persian turquoise carried along the Silk Road to rubies glowing in Burmese courts. Each stone tells a story. Together, they reveal that peace was never abstract. It was tangible. It glittered. And sometimes it was worth more than any victory won on the battlefield. Because in the end, peace had a price. And that price for the stone at the top of this list was so staggering that the world is still paying it today. Rank number 10, rose quartz, the stone of reconciliation in ancient conflicts. In archaeological digs across South America and parts of medieval Europe, one mineral keeps reappearing in contexts that surprise even the most seasoned researchers: rose quartz. At first glance, it might look unremarkable, a translucent to cloudy pink crystal, softer in tone than the brilliance of emerald or the fire of diamond. But its placement in ritual pits, foundation stones, and burial offerings tells a deeper story. Rose quartz, for centuries, was not just a mineral. It was a symbol of reconciliation, a peace stone, one that communities turned to when conflict had left scars that weapons could not heal. The geological identity of rose quartz is straightforward. It is a variety of quartz colored by tiny traces of titanium, iron, or manganese. Deposits are found in abundance, from Brazil to Madagascar, from the Black Hills of South Dakota to the mines of India. Unlike gemstones tied to wealth and empire, rose quartz was never scarce in the strictest sense. Its value came not from rarity, but from what human societies chose to make of it. And what they made was a symbol of peace. In South America, evidence shows that tribal groups used rose quartz during post-war rituals. When two clans fought over hunting grounds, territory, or resources, and eventually agreed to a truce, the chiefs would present rose quartz at the heart of the reconciliation ceremony. The stone's soft pink hue was understood as the antithesis of blood red. Where red was war, pink was peace. Where red was the reminder of wounds, pink was the promise that wounds would close. The act of placing rose quartz on the ceremonial ground was a way of saying, we acknowledge the loss, but we choose not to continue it. This role extended into sacred spaces. In some excavated ritual sites, archaeologists have found rose quartz set beside ceremonial vessels, fire pits, or burial offerings tied to warriors. It suggests that the stone was more than decorative. It carried a function: to signal closure, to transform violence into resolution. To hold rose quartz was to have a symbol of shared survival after conflict. Medieval Europe offers another layer to the story. Records and archaeological remains indicate that rose quartz was embedded in the foundations of churches, meeting halls, and even town council buildings. These were not casual placements. Communities placed the stone deliberately, often at moments when internal conflict had torn towns apart. Disputes over land, feuds between clans, or even uprisings could divide a community beyond repair. The ritual of embedding rose quartz beneath a new structure was an act of binding, ensuring that the building itself stood as a reminder of reconciliation. A church with rose quartz in its foundation was not only a place of worship, but a permanent mark of peace after division. From a national or economic standpoint, rose quartz never reached the value of precious stones. It was not auctioned for kingdoms, nor demanded as tribute. And yet, that very lack of monetary power may have been the reason it worked so well in peace rituals. No one fought wars over rose quartz, which made it neutral. When leaders brought the stone forward during reconciliation ceremonies, neither side felt it was a tool of dominance. Instead, it became a shared witness, a material object that both parties could accept without suspicion. In that way, rose quartz gained a value that transcended price. It was priceless not because it was rare, but because it was trusted. The symbolic meaning of its color amplified this role. Pink across cultures has often been associated with compassion, care, and the absence of aggression. In the context of war and peace, rose quartz came to embody the color without blood. Its use in ceremonies was a cultural technology, a way of teaching future generations. When this stone appears, hostility ends here. Modern archaeology treats such practices as more than superstition. They are understood as mechanisms of conflict resolution, encoded in ritual and material culture. For societies without written treaties or centralized governments, the stone served as the treaty. It was the object that held the memory of an agreement, one that could outlast the spoken word. To this day, the discovery of rose quartz in specific sites gives archaeologists insight into moments when peace was chosen over perpetual violence. Seen in this light, rose quartz earns its place among the gemstones linked to the ending of wars. It never shifted the fate of empires the way diamonds or jade might have. It did not decide the boundaries of nations or the rise and fall of dynasties. But it mattered in a different arena, the everyday survival of communities. At the level of clans, tribes, and small towns, rose quartz was the stone of closure. It was the reminder that even ordinary minerals can carry extraordinary weight when societies invest them with meaning. And so while rose quartz may not have crowned monarchs or purchased empires, it achieved something no less vital. It allowed fractured communities to recognize each other once more, to sit down, and to begin the difficult work of peace. Its gentle hue, untouched by blood, stands as a testament that even the most common of stones can become the rarest of symbols. The choice to end conflict. Rank number 9, Spinel Ruby Balas, the crown jewel that ended rivalries. In the chronicles of medieval diplomacy, a single stone often decided whether swords were drawn or sheathed. For centuries, that stone was believed to be ruby. But archaeology and gemology tell us a different truth. Many of those rubies were not rubies at all. They were spinels, the so-called ruby Balas, mined from the forbidding mountains of Badakhshan in Afghanistan. This case of mistaken identity gave Spinel a power few other gems can claim. It ended wars while wearing the mask of another. The geology of these stones is as unassuming as their history is dramatic. Spinel is a magnesium-aluminium oxide, crystallizing under heat and pressure in metamorphic rocks. Its red varieties are visually striking, their tones ranging from soft rose to vivid crimson. In antiquity, without the science to separate ruby from spinel, both were considered the same. A red gem of clarity and weight was ruby. That misidentification would shape centuries of politics. Badakhshan, high in the Pamir Mountains, held the richest deposits of Balas spinel. To reach the mines was treacherous. Narrow passes, hostile terrain, and thin air. Yet rulers from Persia, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent coveted the stones so intensely that they became bargaining chips in diplomacy. When empires clashed across Central Asia, tribute often included great red gems from these mines. To receive such a stone was to receive a visible declaration of peace. One of the most famous examples dates back to the Mughal emperors of India. Their treasury brimmed with red gems from Badakhshan, brought as tribute from defeated or reconciled rulers. To the Mughals, a massive ruby gifted in submission symbolized not just wealth, but the end of military opposition. In return, peace was granted, at least temporarily. The irony, revealed only centuries later, is that these were not rubies at all. They were spinels, serving as silent arbiters of truce. Persian chronicles echo similar exchanges. Between rival dynasties, the transfer of Balas rubies sealed treaties. At times, they were sent ahead of armies, functioning as peace offerings to forestall invasion. In this way, the stones were not rewards after war, but substitutes for it, gifts meant to stop the march of bloodshed before it began. Archaeology reveals their long journey. Several large spinels, once mistaken for rubies, now sit in European royal regalia. The Black Prince's ruby in Britain's imperial state crown is perhaps the most famous. This gem, weighing over 170 carats, passed through Moorish, Spanish, and English hands, each transfer linked to treaties and shifts in power. It too was a stone of peace, delivered between warring states. Only in the modern era did gemology prove that it was not ruby at all, but spinel. The symbolism of these exchanges cannot be overstated. A single stone carried across borders represented more than wealth. It embodied survival, truce, and the cessation of hostility. Whether placed in a Mughal treasury or mounted on a European crown, the meaning was the same. Here lies proof that war has ended. That such weight was carried by a stone mistaken for another shows how perception shapes history. From a national perspective, the mines of Badakhshan were strategic assets. Whoever controlled them controlled not just a trade, but a diplomatic instrument. Spinels flowed outward from those peaks, influencing relations from Samarkand to Delhi, from Isfahan to London. They became the mineral currency of peace, traded not for coin, but for stability. For modern archaeology, the story of Balas Spinel is both a caution and a revelation. It reminds us that the identity of objects matters less than the belief societies attach to them. For centuries, leaders believed they were dealing in rubies, and so the piece they purchased carried the ruby's aura of kingship. Yet behind the belief was Spinel, a stone no less beautiful, but historically overlooked. In a sense, Spinel's most significant achievement was invisibility. It ended wars while hiding in plain sight. Thus, Spinel Ruby Balas deserves its place in this ranking. It was not merely a gem of beauty, it was a disguised mediator, shaping treaties, sealing alliances, and halting battles under a borrowed name. To this day, when we gaze at the so-called rubies of royal crowns, we are really looking at witnesses of peace, spinels that carried the burden of ending wars. Rank number 8, turquoise, the peace stone of Persia and beyond. High in the arid hills of northeastern Iran, miners have pulled a blue-green stone from the earth for over 2,000 years. This was the turquoise of Nishapur, famed across the ancient world and known to Persians as a fragment of the sky itself. For rulers and warlords, it was more than ornament. It was a guarantor of promises, a material witness to peace, and one of the earliest gemstones used to prevent war from returning. Geologically, turquoise is a hydrous phosphate of copper and aluminium, created where groundwater rich in copper seeps into arid rock formations. The result is a mineral with a color unlike any other, the pure sky blue that comes only from Persian deposits. To hold such a stone in antiquity was to have a piece of heaven, the sky brought down to earth. That perception gave turquoise its power. From the Achaemenid kings to the Safavid Shahs, Persian rulers treated turquoise as both a national resource and a diplomatic instrument. In times of conflict with neighboring states, gifting turquoise was not simply generosity, it was a signal. The heavens witnessed this peace. The stone's celestial hue stood for divine oversight, a reminder that breaking an agreement sealed with turquoise risked not only earthly consequences, but cosmic disfavor. In societies where religion and kingship were inseparable, such a reminder carried weight enough to quiet armies. Archaeology reveals this tradition in both texts and objects. Turquoise inlaid into weapon hilts has been found in royal burials from Persia to Central Asia. These were not weapons meant for battle. They were ceremonial, likely used during treaties and offerings. A sword decorated with turquoise was transformed into a peace token, the weapon of war neutralized by a stone of heaven. During the medieval period, turquoise traveled the Silk Road as tribute and alliance currency. When Persian envoys negotiated with Central Asian khans, turquoise was among the gifts offered. In Ottoman records, turquoise pieces appear as part of dowries and diplomatic exchanges. In China, turquoise carvings arrived as gifts acknowledging a truce, their origin from Nishapur carefully recorded. Each transfer was more than a trade. It was a declaration that war had ended, at least for the moment. The stone's protective reputation also played a role. Soldiers once wore turquoise amulets, believing they prevented harm in battle. By extension, leaders believed turquoise could protect entire states. To exchange turquoise at the end of a conflict was to extend that protection from the individual to the collective. A symbolic shield over both sides of a peace agreement. The value of turquoise to Persia as a nation was immense. Control of Nishapur's mines meant control of a resource respected from Cairo to Samarkand. Dynasties often reserved the mines for the state, ensuring that only the ruling elite could distribute the stones in diplomacy. This monopoly turned turquoise into a kind of early, soft power. While gold and silver might be demanded as tribute, turquoise was the stone that made alliances endure, because it carried cultural and spiritual meaning no precious metal could equal. The symbolic weight of its color amplified this role. Blue was universally associated with the sky, the eternal dome above all kingdoms. To present turquoise in a treaty was to bind the agreement under heaven's gaze. Unlike diamonds or rubies, which symbolized wealth and victory, turquoise symbolized order, continuity, and divine approval. Its message was clear. This peace is overseen not by men, but by the heavens. Today, archaeologists and historians see turquoise as a cultural bridge. Excavations from Iran to the Mediterranean repeatedly show it appearing in moments of transition, after wars, during dynastic marriages, or in the founding of new cities. Each context ties back to one function: to calm disputes and cement cooperation. In this sense, turquoise was never just a stone of beauty. It was a political actor carried across deserts and courts to ensure that war would not resume. Its place in this ranking is deserved not because it dazzled empires with brilliance, but because it anchored peace with belief. To look at a piece of Persian turquoise today, that luminous sky blue surface, smooth yet enduring, is to look at the color of ancient treaties. It is the shade of wars halted, of swords sheathed, of rival leaders compelled to accept that peace, once sealed by heaven's stone, could not be broken without consequence. Rank number 7, Burmese ruby, the blood-red stone that sealed peace. In the jungled mountains of Myanmar lies the Mogok Valley, a place whose soil has poured forth some of the most coveted gemstones in human history. The Burmese ruby, famed for its vivid pigeon's blood hue, was once enough to spark invasions. And paradoxically, it was also enough to end them. Few gemstones capture the paradox of war and peace as sharply as the ruby from Burma. Geologically, rubies are corundum crystals infused with chromium, which gives them their distinctive red. But the Mogok rubies stood apart. Their fluorescence under sunlight gave them a fiery inner glow, a quality so rare that it came to symbolize vitality itself. Burmese rulers saw in these stones not only beauty, but the very essence of life, a resource worth bleeding for, and at times a resource worth surrendering to stop the bleeding. Southeast Asia's chronicles are filled with wars fought over Mogok's mines. Kingdoms from Siam, Arakan, and Ava mounted campaigns to seize control of ruby-bearing valleys. Battles raged not only for territory but for access to these crimson treasures. For a ruler to possess a ruby of extraordinary size and clarity was to wield a symbol of divine right, a stone that declared his legitimacy as much as his crown or throne. Yet the identical rubies that fueled wars were also central to peace. In Burmese chronicles, we read of truces sealed with gemstones offered to rival kings. Tribute lists detail rubies among elephants, gold and silver, gifts whose purpose was to buy back stability. To hand over a ruby was to admit defeat, but also to ensure survival. The recipient, upon accepting such a gem, recognized it as a pledge. The fight ends here. The symbolism was powerful. In warfare, rubies were thought to protect warriors, to make blood loss less deadly, even to render men invincible. As peace offerings, they inverted this meaning. What once empowered violence now embodies restraint. To receive a ruby was to obtain not just wealth, but the promise of life preserved rather than taken. Archaeological evidence supports these records. Ceremonial regalia of Burmese kings often featured enormous rubies, some carved into talismanic shapes. But equally telling are the rubies found in caches along old trade routes. Stones likely sent as tribute during times of conflict resolution. These were not sold in markets. They were carried under guard, presented in formal audiences, and recorded as the material witnesses of peace. When British colonial powers entered Burma in the 19th century, they too recognized the strategic and symbolic importance of Mogok's rubies. Treaties and negotiations surrounding mining concessions often rested on control of ruby-producing regions. In this way, rubies shifted from instruments of Southeast Asian diplomacy to bargaining chips on a global scale. The very stone that had ended wars between neighboring kingdoms now became part of imperial negotiations with foreign powers. The national value of Burmese rubies remains immense. For centuries, they have been inseparable from the identity of Myanmar, woven into chronicles, legends, and diplomacy alike. They are not just stones of beauty, they are archives of conflict and resolution, crystallized reminders of the wars that were fought in the truces that followed. From a broader archaeological lens, Burmese rubies illustrate a recurring theme: gemstones as double-edged symbols. Their brilliance incites greed, drawing kingdoms into conflict, yet the same brilliance offers a way out, a gift so potent it can quiet armies. This paradox lies at the heart of their history. To see a Burmese ruby in a museum today is to see both sides of human ambition, the drive to conquer and the need to reconcile. Thus, the Burmese ruby takes its place in this ranking not only as a gemstone of staggering beauty, but as one that shaped the fate of kingdoms. It was the stone that warriors fought for and kings surrendered to secure peace. Its deep red color reminds us of blood spilt, but also of blood spared. And in that dual legacy, it stands as one of history's most paradoxical instruments of peace. Rank number 6. Natural pearls. The ocean's tribute that ended conflicts. Before oil, before skyscrapers, the Persian Gulf's greatest treasure lay beneath its waters. Divers would plunge without oxygen, with only a nose clip and a rope, into the depths where oysters hid a secret of immense value. From these perilous dives came natural pearls, luminous spheres that would become more than ornaments. In a region often divided by rivalry and tribal war, pearls became the ocean's tribute, offered to rulers and exchanged between states to end conflicts. Unlike gemstones forged deep within the earth, pearls are organic miracles. They form inside living oysters when layers of nacre coat an intruding grain of sand or shell. The result is a gem that seems alive with light, its surface smooth and iridescent. Natural pearls were rare. Only one in thousands of oysters might yield one. To harvest enough for a necklace or a royal gift required fleets of divers and entire seasons at sea. Their scarcity made them symbols of wealth and prestige. Their origin in the ocean gave them an aura of purity, gifts granted not by mines or kings, but by nature itself. For centuries, the Persian Gulf was the world's most important source of natural pearls. Bahrain, Qatar, and the Trucial states, modern United Arab Emirates, built their economies on the pearl trade. Merchants carried them across trade routes to India, Persia, and Europe, where they adorned crowns and reliquaries. But beyond wealth, pearls became instruments of peace. In tribal societies where conflict over water, grazing land, or sea routes could erupt into bloodshed, the payment of pearls often settled disputes. To present a string of flawless Gulf pearls was to acknowledge the cost of war and choose the path of truce. Historical records describe pearl tribute in the Ottoman and Safavid periods. When Gulf rulers sought protection or reconciliation, pearls were dispatched as diplomatic gifts. They were sent to Constantinople, to Isfahan, and to Delhi. A basket of pearls was not just a sign of submission, it was a statement. The ocean has given, and we offer this to prevent further strife. The symbolic logic was simple. If pearls were nature's most delicate gift, to waste them in conflict would be an offense to both heaven and sea. Pearls also played a role in marriage diplomacy. In Islamic courts, pearls featured heavily in dowries between rival houses or states, serving to turn adversaries into kin. A necklace of Gulf pearls, delivered as part of a marriage alliance, did more than adorn a bride. It ended disputes between families and forged bonds that redirected potential wars into shared prosperity. The archaeology of pearling settlements tells the same story. Excavations in Bahrain have uncovered pearl weights, diving tools, and trade records, showing how entire towns depended on the cycle of diving, trading, and gifting. These were not villages of warlords, but communities structured around the extraction of a peace commodity. Their pearls moved outward into the courts of sultans and emperors, carrying with them the promise of stability. For Gulf societies, pearls were national lifeblood. Before the oil boom of the 20th century, pearling sustained economies and gave states leverage in diplomacy. Wars that might have devastated fragile coastal communities were often resolved through the exchange of pearls. In this way, the ocean's tribute preserved lives on land. Symbolically, pearls embodied purity and divine oversight. Their roundness and brilliance evoked the moon, another celestial witness to human oaths. To hand over pearls as part of a peace settlement was to say, "This gift comes from beyond us, and breaking this truce dishonors the sea and the heavens alike." Today, the natural pearl industry has all but vanished, replaced by cultured pearls and oil wealth. Yet the legacy remains. Museums in Doha, Manama, and Abu Dhabi preserve strings of Gulf pearls once carried into palaces as tokens of reconciliation. Each tells the same story, that long before treaties were written on paper, peace could be sealed with the glow of the ocean's rarest offering. Thus, natural pearls earn their place in this ranking. They were not mined in blood or fought over with armies. They were drawn from the sea at significant risk, then carried ashore to heal divisions. As the ocean's tribute, they transformed rivalries into agreements and ended conflicts that might otherwise have consumed entire coasts. Their lustrous surfaces still remind us of the fragile but enduring possibility of peace, carried from the depths of the sea to the councils of men. Rank number 5, Nephrite Jade, the Imperial Stone of Peace Treaties. In the chronicles of ancient diplomacy, few substances carried as much authority as jade. Long before diamonds or rubies commanded attention in royal courts, Nephrite jade served as the imperial stone of peace treaties. Its smooth green surface was not merely decoration. It was legitimacy, purity, and the very material through which rulers declared that war had ended and order was restored. Geologically, nephrite is unassuming. It is a tough, fibrous mineral composed of actinolite and tremolite. Unlike brittle crystals, nephrite resists fracture, allowing it to be carved into blades, ornaments, and seals, polished to a glass-like finish. Its durability gave rise to its symbolism. Jade was not just beautiful, it was enduring. Agreements sealed in jade, like the stone itself, were meant to last. In China, jade was revered as the stone of heaven. For millennia, it was considered more precious than gold or silver. Emperors conducted sacrifices with jade discs, courtiers carried jade tablets, and treaties were confirmed with jade seals. When rival states sought reconciliation, jade objects often formed the heart of the exchange. To present jade to the imperial throne was to acknowledge heavenly mandate. It said, "This peace is not just political, it is sanctioned by cosmic order." The Hishir, a famous jade disc discovered during the Warring States period, became the ultimate symbol of this principle. Contested, stolen, and bargained over, it was eventually carved into the imperial seal of China. That seal, pressed onto treaties and decrees, bore the authority of heaven itself. In this way, nephrite jade transformed from mineral to institution, anchoring agreements between states and legitimizing dynastic transitions. But jade's diplomatic role was not confined to China. Across Central Asia, nomadic confederations offered nephrite as tribute to the Chinese courts, securing safe passage or truce along contested borders. Archaeological finds in Xinjiang and Mongolia reveal jade pieces deliberately placed in diplomatic caches, tokens of negotiated peace between steppe and empire. These stones traveled vast distances, carrying not only material value, but symbolic recognition of authority. On the opposite side of the world, among the Maori of New Zealand, nephrite, known as punamu, played an equally crucial role. Carved into weapons such as the mir or adze, these objects were initially tools of conflict. Yet when wars ended, the same nephrite weapons were exchanged between tribes as taonga, sacred treasures. To gift a punamu blade was to transform a gun into a bond, a way of ensuring peace endured. Oral traditions describe these stones being handed down through generations, each one a memory of battles ended and treaties kept. What unites these traditions, from the courts of China to the marae of Aotearoa, is the conviction that nephrite jade embodied permanence. Unlike perishable offerings of food or fleeting tribute of silver, jade endured. A jade treaty gift outlasted the signatories. It passed from hand to hand as a living reminder that peace had once been chosen and must continue. The symbolic qualities of jade reinforce this authority. Its color, ranging from milky white to deep green, was associated with purity, harmony, and virtue. Its toughness mirrored moral strength. Its polish reflected clarity of governance. To hold jade was to have more than a stone. It was to keep an ideal. That is why Chinese philosophers compared jade to human virtue, and why emperors relied on it to legitimize their reign. For nations, jade was both treasure and shield. In China, control of jade mines in Khotan and elsewhere meant not only economic gain, but diplomatic leverage. For the Maori, access to nephrite rivers shaped intertribal power and alliances. Wherever nephrite was found, it became central to identity, economy, and above all, to peace. Today, museums preserve jade seals, discs, and weapons as art objects. But to archaeologists, they are more than artifacts. They are documents, carved in stone, of peace agreements that change the course of history. When we look at nephrite jade, we are not simply admiring its polish. We are witnessing the material through which enemies laid down arms, through which states acknowledged each other, and through which rulers claimed heaven's approval for peace. That is why nephrite jade earns its place here, as the imperial stone of peace treaties. It was not only the symbol of power, it was the tool of reconciliation. Its hardness ensured its survival, and its cultural weight ensured that peace sealed in jade would be remembered as long as the stone itself endured. Rank number 4, Lapis Lazuli, the blue witness of ancient alliances. High in the mountains of Badakhshan, Afghanistan, miners have quarried a blue rock for over 6,000 years. Veined with white calcite, sprinkled with golden pyrite, its color has no rival in nature. This was Lapis Lazuli, the most coveted stone of the Bronze Age, and the one that became the silent witness of peace treaties and alliances across the ancient Near East. Unlike gemstones cut from crystals, lapis is a metamorphic rock, a mixture of minerals dominated by lazurite, which gives it its deep ultramarine blue. Its scarcity outside Afghanistan made it one of the first truly global trade stones. By the 4th millennium BCE, lapis traveled along caravan routes into Mesopotamia and Egypt, where rulers treated it as proof of status, legitimacy, and divine favor. Archaeology shows that lapis was more than an ornament. In Sumerian and Akkadian records, lapis was listed among the tribute exchanged between rival city-states to seal truces. To present lapis was to acknowledge not only wealth, but heavenly sanction. Its blue surface, as radiant as the sky, symbolized that the agreement was bound under divine watch. The Amarna letters, clay tablets of royal correspondence from the 14th century BCE, offer vivid testimony. Egyptian pharaohs and Near Eastern kings wrote of lapis lazuli as part of diplomatic gifts sent with envoys. In one exchange, lapis beads were dispatched alongside gold and ivory as tokens of peace between Egypt and Mitanni. The stones, carefully recorded, represented more than decoration. They were the material signatures of alliances meant to end border conflicts and secure stability. In Mesopotamian temples, lapis inlays decorated thrones, ritual objects, and foundation deposits. These were not aesthetic choices alone. To seat a ruler upon a throne of lapis was to make his reign visible to the gods. When lapis was included in treaties, the same logic applied. The gods themselves would bear witness to the oath, their judgment encoded in the stone's color. Breaking a treaty sealed with lapis was to defy heaven itself. Egypt, too, embraced this symbolism. From the Old Kingdom onward, lapis was used in funerary masks, jewelry, and diplomatic gifts. The mask of Tutankhamun bears inlays of lapis, its blue surface signifying eternity and cosmic order. In diplomacy, pharaohs offered lapis to neighboring rulers as a sign of peace and divine favor. In turn, foreign envoys presented Lapis to Egypt's court, acknowledging the supremacy of the Nile kingdom and its gods. Each stone exchange carried the weight of international recognition. The value of Lapis was not only symbolic but geopolitical. Badakhshan's mines, remote though they were, became focal points of power. Control of the trade meant influence over the flow of prestige goods across Central and Western Asia. Rulers who commanded Lapis commanded respect. For this reason, Lapis was as effective as gold in treaty exchanges, perhaps even more so, for gold symbolized wealth, while Lapis symbolized legitimacy under heaven. Archaeologists excavating royal graves in Ur found lapis beads, gaming boards, and inlays buried with rulers. These were items not of conquest but of diplomacy, marking relationships secured in life and honored in death. The sheer distance the stone traveled, from Afghanistan to Mesopotamia, Egypt, and beyond, speaks to its role as a mediator. No other stone of its time bore such a consistent presence in alliances and treaties. From a cultural perspective, Lapis embodied truth, order, and cosmic stability. Its blue mirrored the sky, its golden pyrite flecks mirrored the stars. To place Lapis in a treaty exchange was to invoke the entire heavens as witnesses. Agreements sealed with Lapis were not simply between men, they were contracts acknowledged by the divine. Today, museums from Cairo to London display Lapis artifacts, cylinder seals, amulets, and beads that once passed between rulers as pledges of peace. They are not only works of art, but archives of diplomacy, surviving witnesses to alliances that shaped the ancient world. For these reasons, Lapis Lazuli stands as the blue witness of ancient alliances. It did not merely shine in crowns or temples. It bore silent testimony to treaties that ended wars, to agreements that stabilized empires, and to the human belief that heaven itself could be bound into peace through the brilliance of a single stone. Rank number 3, Colombian Emerald, the green pledge of conquest and truce. When Spanish conquistadors entered the high valleys of Colombia in the 16th century, they did not simply find new lands to claim. They stumbled upon the most brilliant green gems the world had ever seen, emeralds from the Muzo and Chiver mines. For the indigenous Muisca people, these stones were not commodities. They were sacred gifts of the earth, offerings to water spirits and fertility gods. But to the Spanish, they were treasure, and soon these gems would become both the fuel of conquest and the pledges of peace that ended it. Geologically, emerald is a variety of beryl colored by chromium and vanadium. In Colombia, unique geological pressures created stones of unrivaled clarity and saturation. Their green seemed to glow from within, unmatched by any other deposit. To European eyes accustomed to sapphires and rubies, Colombian emeralds appeared otherworldly, the perfect prize to display both wealth and power. The Muisca mined emeralds not for trade but for ritual. They placed them in lakes as offerings, used them in fertility ceremonies, and guarded them as community treasures. Spanish chroniclers described lakes glittering with emeralds beneath the surface, sanctuaries of belief rather than mines of profit. But conquest changed everything. The emeralds were seized, ripped from sacred contexts, and shipped across the Atlantic. In colonial records, emeralds appear again and again as terms of peace. Defeated chiefs surrendered caches of gems to end campaigns, trading sacred stones for survival. In this way, emeralds became paradoxical, objects of conquest that simultaneously ended war. Once in Spain, emeralds took on another life. The Spanish crown quickly recognized its diplomatic power. To the Ottoman court in Constantinople, to the Mughal emperors in India, and to the Shahs of Persia, emeralds were dispatched as royal gifts. These were not minor trinkets. Some weighed hundreds of carats, carved into goblets, rosaries, or Quranic inscriptions. Each was meant as a pledge of goodwill, a stone whose brilliance signaled sincerity. In moments where political tension threatened to spill into conflict, emeralds helped secure alliances. The Mughal emperors in particular revered Colombian emeralds. They inscribed them with prayers, setting them into swords and thrones. One emerald, gifted through Spanish intermediaries, was carved with Islamic verses and carried as a talisman of divine protection. To receive such a gem was to receive not only wealth, but recognition, an acknowledgement that empires across continents sought peace through shared treasures. In this way, emeralds became instruments of both conquest and truce. In Colombia, they ended indigenous resistance by being surrendered to the conquistadors. In Europe and Asia, they ended diplomatic hostilities through the exchange of gifts between rulers. Invariably, their green color carried symbolic weight. To the Muisca, it was the color of water and fertility. To European and Islamic courts, it was the color of renewal and eternal spring. Everywhere, green stood for life continuing after violence. Archaeological finds underscore this dual role. In Colombia, emeralds recovered from lakes and ceremonial sites remind us of their sacred role before conquest. In European treasuries, carved Colombian emeralds remain as records of treaties sealed with green fire. Together, they tell a single story. Emeralds were stones of surrender and of reconciliation, extracted in violence but circulated as pledges of peace. From a national perspective, emeralds became part of Colombia's identity. Even after independence, Colombian emeralds symbolize both suffering and wealth, conquest and continuity. They remind us that peace often comes at a cost. In this case, the cost of surrendering sacred stones to halt bloodshed. Today, Colombian emeralds command the highest prices in the gem market, yet their historical value lies not only in carats or clarity, but in their role as the green pledges of history. They were stones that crossed oceans and cultures, carrying the message that conflict, however brutal, could be halted by the brilliance of nature's most vivid green. That is why Colombian emeralds stand as rank number 3. They were the gems that ended wars in two senses, through forced surrender in the New World and through diplomatic exchange in the Old. Their legacy is not simple. It is a paradox itself. Emeralds as spoils of conquest, emeralds as instruments of peace. The same stone that marked subjugation also marked reconciliation, making Colombian emeralds truly the green pledge of conquest and truce. Rank number 2, Jadeite, the heavenly tribute that halted wars. Deep in the mountains of northern Myanmar, miners have long extracted a stone that glows with a green so vivid it seems to capture life itself. This is Jadeite, rarer and denser than its cousin Nephrite, and destined to reshape diplomacy in Asia. Known today as Imperial Jade, it became the heavenly tribute that halted wars, carried across borders not as spoils but as pledges of peace. Geologically, jadeite is born in metamorphic belts, where immense pressure transforms rock into dense, interlocking crystals. The presence of chromium infuses the stone with its luminous green, sometimes translucent enough to look alive under light. For centuries, only Burma held deposits of such quality. In the valleys of Hapakan and Mietkina, jadeite was carved from boulders and loaded onto caravans bound for China. What began as trade soon became politics, and eventually the very foundation of peace agreements. For millennia, China had revered nephrite as its sacred jade. But by the 18th century, jadeite eclipsed it. Once Chinese emperors saw its intensity, they declared it the superior stone, the actual material of heaven's mandate. This transformation gave jadeite extraordinary weight in diplomacy. To offer jadeite was to provide not just wealth, but recognition of cosmic order. Its green became the color of harmony and legitimacy, and it soon entered the language of treaties. Between Burma and China, jadeite was tribute in times of war and peace alike. When border disputes flared, Burmese rulers dispatched shipments of jadeite to Beijing as a pledge of reconciliation. For the Qing emperors, receiving jadeite was more than receiving treasure. It was a visible act of submission, a material declaration that conflict was over and harmony restored. The stone was entered into palace records as tribute, ensuring that history itself recognized peace. Within China, jadeite took on roles that reinforced its power as a peace stone. Imperial seals carved from jadeite became instruments of law, stamping decrees that ended rebellions and confirmed alliances. Court officials presented jadeite ornaments during negotiations, their presence a guarantee that words spoken under its glow carried sincerity. In effect, jadeite became a diplomatic language of its own. To place it on the table was to say the heavens themselves endorsed the truce. Its symbolism amplified this role. Jade was long believed to embody purity, virtue, and immortality. Philosophers compared it to moral perfection, while emperors treated it as proof of their divine right. Jadeite, with its greater brilliance, intensified these associations. In treaties, it transformed political compromise into cosmic order. A border dispute settled with Jadeite was not merely a pragmatic deal, it was framed as a return to heaven's balance. Beyond China, Jadeite also influenced Southeast Asian politics. Burmese chronicles describe Jadeite offerings made to prevent prolonged warfare with neighboring states. For local rulers, controlling the mines meant both military risk and diplomatic advantage. By yielding Jadeite in tribute, they turned potential invasions into alliances, replacing swords with stones. Archaeological evidence reflects this story. Large Jadeite carvings survive in Chinese museums, their inscriptions recording imperial decrees. Many were gifts from Burma, their very material proof of peace agreements centuries past. In Southeast Asia, Jadeite ornaments linked to treaties have been recovered from royal caches, showing how the stones circulated not as trade, but as diplomacy. The national value of Jadeite cannot be overstated. For Myanmar, it was a resource that placed the kingdom at the center of Asian geopolitics. For China, it was the ultimate imperial material, the stone through which heaven's will was expressed. When war threatened, Jadeite moved along caravan routes, carrying with it the weight of treaties and the promise of stability. Today, collectors prize Jadeite for its beauty and rarity. But its more profound legacy is not commercial, it is political. Each polished boulder, each carved pendant, carries echoes of centuries when this stone was not decoration, but destiny. Wars were paused, borders stabilized, and empires legitimized through their presence. That is why Jadeite stands here as the heavenly tribute that halted wars. It was more than a gem. It was the medium through which rulers acknowledged each other, through which conflict transformed into order, and through which heaven itself was invoked as the ultimate witness of peace. Rank number 1, diamonds from Golconda, the stones that decided empires. Along the riverbeds of Golconda in southern India, men once sifted gravel under a scorching sun, searching for stones unlike any others on earth. From these alluvial soils came diamonds of unparalleled clarity and size, gems that would pass from hand to hand, throne to throne, shaping the fate of kingdoms. These were the diamonds of Golconda, the stones that decided empires. Geologically, Golconda diamonds were exceptional. Classified today as Type 2A, they are almost chemically pure, free from nitrogen impurities. This gave them unmatched transparency, often described as limpid water. Some weighed hundreds of carats, large enough to be cut into crown jewels. In antiquity, before new deposits were found in Brazil or Africa, Golconda was the world's primary source of diamonds. Whoever controlled its mines controlled the most coveted stones on the planet. From the 14th to the 18th century, Golconda diamonds passed through the treasuries of the Deccan sultanates, the Mughal emperors, the Persian shahs, Afghan kings, and European monarchies. Each transfer marked more than commerce. It marked shifts in power, the conclusion of wars, and the forging of alliances. A single diamond could carry the weight of an empire. The Koh-i-Noor, one of the most famous diamonds in history, illustrates this perfectly. Originally mined in Golconda, it adorned the Mughal peacock throne in Delhi. When Nader Shah of Persia invaded in 1739, he demanded the diamond as part of the surrender, ending hostilities and asserting his supremacy. Later, it moved to Afghan and Sikh rulers, each time changing hands in treaties that concluded bloody campaigns. Eventually, the British claimed it after annexing Punjab, and it entered the crown jewels of England. Every transfer was a line in history, written not in ink but in diamond. The Hope Diamond, the Regent, the Orlov, all traced their origins to Golconda. Each became a centerpiece in royal collections, not only as symbols of wealth, but as trophies of political resolution. Wars that might have continued ended instead with diamonds as tribute, their brilliance binding agreements that gold or silver alone could not secure. In Mughal chronicles, diamonds are recorded as both spoils and peace tokens. Defeated rulers were stripped of their jewels, with the largest diamonds presented to the victors as terms of settlement. To surrender a diamond was to concede not just defeat, but legitimacy. It meant recognizing that sovereignty had shifted. In this sense, diamonds were not merely witnesses to history. They were the very instruments by which history was decided. The symbolism of diamonds intensified their power. More complex than any known material, they were seen as eternal, unbreakable, invincible. To possess a Golconda diamond was to claim that same invincibility for one's reign. When such a stone was offered in a treaty, it signaled that the victor now held heaven's sanction. When such a stone was surrendered, it signaled that the defeated had accepted their fate. Few objects condense so much political meaning into so small a form. Archaeology and history together show how deeply these stones penetrated global diplomacy. European traders in the 17th century funneled Golconda diamonds into royal treasuries in France, Russia, and England, where they became embedded in crowns and regalia. Each stone was not just an ornament, but evidence. Evidence that conflicts had ended, territories had been won or ceded, and rulers had staked their legitimacy on the possession of a diamond. For India, the diamonds of Golconda were both a blessing and a curse. They enriched kingdoms, but they also drew waves of invaders, each determined to control the mines or seize the stones already extracted. From the Deccan Sultanates to the British Raj, Golconda's diamonds defined the region's fate as much as its armies did. Today, Golconda diamonds sit in museums and treasuries around the world. Visitors admire their brilliance, their flawless surfaces, their deep histories. But behind each stone lies a record of empires risen and fallen, wars concluded, and treaties signed. They are not just gems. They are chapters of history crystallized in carbon. That is why Golconda's diamonds stand as the final rank. More than any other gemstone, they carried the power to end wars and redraw the world map. They were the ultimate currency of peace, surrendered or bestowed to decide the destiny of nations. Truly, they were the stones that decided empires. These were the 10 gemstones that once silenced swords and rewrote history. Stones that proved peace could be bought, not with treaties on paper, but with brilliance carved by nature itself. If you've enjoyed this journey through forgotten treasures and the hidden diplomacy behind them, consider supporting the channel with a like and a subscription. It's the simplest way to let us know you want more, and it gives us the motivation to keep uncovering the stories that rarely make it into textbooks. Because the more we dig, the more we discover. Not all gems bring peace. Some ignited wars, some bankrupted rulers, and some were hidden away because the world was never meant to see them. And in our next episode, we'll step into that shadowed history where gemstones did not end conflict, but created it. Which stone was so feared that kings refused to wear it? Which treasure disappeared the moment an empire collapsed? That story is coming soon. Until then, thank you for watching and for giving us the strength to bring you the secrets that history left buried.